Hello gentle listeners, and welcome back to Whispers of the Past. In our last episode, we explored the rise of Camelot, the establishment of a round table, and the growing tensions within Arthur's realm. We saw how Arthur sought to unite the land under his code of chivalry, but not all welcomed his vision. Whispers of dissent spread through the kingdom, hinting at the struggles to come. Today, we turn our gaze to a figure shrouded in mystery who is destined for both greatness and infamy, Morgana. Known to history as a sorceress, a seer, and one of Arthur's most complex adversaries, her story begins long before she became the feared enchantress of legend. Before she was a rival to Camelot, she was a child of noble blood, a young woman with a gift she could not yet control, and a sister to Arthur in ways neither of them understood. Her journey is one of power, betrayal, and fate, but before we dive into the woman she would become, we must first understand the girl she once was. Chapter 1: The Child of Two Worlds. Before she was the infamous enchantress who would challenge the very foundations of Camelot, Morgana was a child caught between two worlds. Born to Glorious, Duke of Cornwall, and Igraine, the same woman who would later become Arthur's mother, her early years were ones of privilege, yet they were marked by an unshakable sense of displacement. Morgana's life was forever changed when her mother was wed to Uther Pendragon, the king who claimed Igraine as his queen after Glorious's death. Though she was raised in the halls of Camelot as a noble lady, resentment brewed within her heart. She was forced to smile in the presence of a king who had taken her mother, and though she lived in the same court as Arthur, they were largely strangers to one another, neither knowing the full truth of their shared bloodline. She felt trapped between the past and present, caught in a world that never fully embraced her. From an early age, Morgana displayed an unusual sensitivity to the world around her. She dreamed of events before they happened, felt the stirrings of forces unseen, and at times, her very presence seemed to alter the course of fate. She would wake in the dead of night, shaken by visions that felt more like memories of a time yet to come. These strange occurrences frightened her, yet they also fascinated her. It wasn't long before whispers of sorcery followed her name, whispers she would come to both fear and embrace. Her childhood in Camelot was one of both privilege and quiet isolation. Though she was dressed in the finest silks and dined at the grandest feasts, there was always a shadow over her. She trained in the etiquette of a noble lady, yet she had a mind sharper than most men of the court. She excelled in conversation, her wit and intelligence making her both admired and feared. However, despite her status, she felt like an outsider. Servants gossiped behind closed doors, knights cast wary glances in her direction, and even the court's advisors seemed uncertain of what to make of her. Despite Camelot's grandeur, the court was no safe place for a girl like Morgana. Uther's hatred of magic was absolute, and his paranoia knew no bounds. He waged relentless campaigns against sorcerers, driving them from a land or condemning them to death. Morgana quickly learned that her abilities, if discovered, could mean her ruin. She buried them deep, masking her growing unease with charm and grace, but the weight of secrecy bore heavily upon her. The walls of the castle, though golden and gleaming, began to feel like a cage. There were those who recognized her gift for what it was. In hushed tones, some spoke of the old ways, the ancient magic that pulsed through the land long before Uther's reign. Among them were those who would one day seek to guide her, to awaken the power that lay dormant within her blood. A few discreet mentors within the court subtly encouraged her, teaching her to observe, to listen, to harness her instincts. But for now, she remained a girl in the shadows of Camelot, uncertain of her place in a kingdom that would never truly be hers. It was in this uncertain childhood that Morgana's destiny began to take shape, setting her upon a path that would one day make her one of the most feared and powerful figures in Arthurian legend. Chapter 2: Whispers of Magic and Betrayal. As Morgana grew older, the weight of her secret visions and abilities became unbearable. Camelot, for all its splendor, was a place of fear for those who possessed magic. Uther Pendragon's hatred of sorcery was absolute, his relentless purges ensuring that no practitioner of the arcane arts could ever feel safe. Morgana learned this at a young age, watching as men and women were dragged from their homes, accused of practicing magic, and executed without trial. The screams of the condemned echoed through the castle halls, filling her with a fear that slowly turned to anger. It was during one of these purges that Morgana first truly understood the depths of Uther's cruelty. A healer in the lower city, a woman who had once nursed Morgana through childhood fevers, was accused of witchcraft. Morgana watched from a high window as the woman pleaded for her life, only to be burned at the stake before the gathered crowd. The sight of it made her sick, but more than that, it made her furious. She had known that Camelot was no safe place for magic, but in that moment, she realized just how dangerous it truly was. Though she had long suspected her own gifts to be unnatural, she now understood the risk they posed. If Uther were to learn of her visions, of the strange energies she sometimes felt stirring in her blood, he would see her as no different from those he hunted. The thought of it terrified her, but it also ignited something deep within, a defiance that would only grow stronger with time. As she struggled with these fears, she found herself drawn to others who whispered of magic in hushed voices. The castle was full of those who sympathized with the old ways, though they dared not speak too openly. A few of the older servants still left small offerings to the spirits of the land, and some of the knights, though loyal to Uther, spoke of a time when magic had been a force for good. Even in the shadows of Camelot, there were those who believed in the power Morgana carried within her. One such person was Gaius, the court physician. Though he outwardly served Uther's laws, Morgana sensed that he knew more than he let on. There were moments when he looked at her with quiet understanding, as if he recognized the struggle she faced. Yet, when she tried to question him about the old ways, he always deflected, warning her to be careful. His silence was both frustrating and telling. More than once, Morgana considered seeking out those who practiced magic in secret. She had heard whispers of druids who still lived beyond Camelot's borders, keepers of ancient knowledge who could help her understand what she was becoming. But to leave Camelot would be dangerous, and she knew that, for now, she had to remain within the castle's walls. So she kept her secret close, waiting, watching, and learning. With each passing day, her resentment toward Uther deepened. She saw the way he ruled, with an iron grip and no room for mercy. The people feared him as much as they revered him, and those who did not fit within his rigid vision of the world were cast aside, or worse. The idea of loyalty to such a man became unbearable. Morgana knew that one day she would have to make a choice, to continue hiding in fear or to embrace the power that was calling to her. And when that day came, she would no longer be just a noble lady of Camelot. She would be something far greater and far more dangerous. Unbeknownst to her, the first steps towards her destiny had already been set in motion. Chapter 3: The Blood of Pendragon. The revelation of Morgana's true lineage came not as a moment of triumph, but as a whispered curse, creeping into her heart like a shadow. For years, she had believed herself to be the orphaned daughter of Glorus, a loyal servant to Uther, raised within the golden halls of Camelot out of duty and honor. But now, the truth unraveled before her, and with it, the very foundation of her world cracked. It was Gaius who had first hinted at the truth, though he had done so with great reluctance. He had cared for Morgana since she was a child, and perhaps, in some way, had hoped to shield her from the burden of her birthright. But secrets never stay buried for long within the walls of Camelot, and as Morgana pieced together the fragments of half-heard conversations and lingering glances, she came to realize the truth. She was not merely the ward of Uther Pendragon. She was his daughter. Arthur and Morgana had spent their youth together, their bond forged in the innocence of childhood. Though Arthur had been raised by Sir Ector away from Camelot, he had returned to court as a squire, where he and Morgana had often trained side by side, their competitive spirits driving them to outmatch one another in games of wit and skill. She had seen him as a brother, a companion in a world of duty and expectation, but now that notion was a lie. They were not just allies of circumstance. They were bound by blood. The knowledge burned within her, an ember growing into a blaze. She had spent years watching Uther rule with an iron fist, condemning those who wielded magic, executing those he deemed traitors. And yet, for all his supposed righteousness, he had lied. He had concealed her existence, denied her a birthright she had never known to claim. Why? To keep his power unchallenged? To prevent scandal? Or perhaps because she was a daughter and not the son he had craved? Morgana wrestled with her emotions, torn between anger and sorrow. She could not help but feel betrayed, not only by Uther, but by those who had kept the secret from her. Gaius, who had always looked upon her with such kindness, had known the truth. Even Merlin, who had become a quiet presence in her life, had likely known more than he ever let on. And Arthur? Did he know? Did he suspect? Or was he just another pawn in Uther's grand design? One night, unable to keep her turmoil contained, Morgana confronted Gaius in his chambers. "Tell me the truth," she demanded, her voice low and steady. "No more evasions, no more half answers. I am Uther's daughter, am I not?" The old physician sighed, his shoulders heavy with the weight of a lifetime of secrets. "Yes, Morgana," he admitted at last. "You are." The words landed like a blow, solidifying what she had already come to suspect. Morgana clenched her fists, trying to steady the whirlwind of emotions within her. "And Arthur? Does he know?" "No," Gaius replied, shaking his head. "Uther has never told him, and I do not think he ever will." The thought struck Morgana like a cold wind. Arthur, the golden son of Camelot, the future king, was just as much in the dark as she had been. But where Morgana had been hidden away, Arthur had been unknowingly shaped for the throne he would one day inherit. The injustice of it all filled her with resentment. Why had Uther cast her aside while elevating Arthur? Why had she been left to the shadows while her half-brother stood in the light? That night, Morgana stood upon the battlements of Camelot, staring out over the kingdom she had called home for so many years. The city stretched before her, its flickering torches painting golden veins through the darkness. This was her home, but it had never truly been hers. Not in the way it was Arthur's, but she would change that. One way or another, she would claim what was rightfully hers. As the wind howled around her, she made a silent vow. She would no longer be a pawn in Uther's game. She would no longer be a shadow lurking in the halls of Camelot. The blood of Pendragon ran through her veins, and she would not let it be ignored. For better or for worse, Morgana's destiny had begun to take shape. Chapter 4: Shadows of Doubt. Morgana's days in Camelot had always been marked by a sense of belonging. At least, that was what she had once believed. But now, armed with the truth of her birthright, every familiar corridor felt foreign. Every smile from those she had once trusted seemed laced with deception. A revelation of her true parentage had begun to change her, though even she did not yet realize just how deep the transformation would go. She still played her part well. At court, she carried herself with grace, engaging in pleasantries with nobles and attending feasts with the same poise as before. But beneath the surface, her mind never rested. Every moment she spent in Uther's presence was tainted by a new awareness of his lies. Every glance at Arthur brought a mix of resentment and sorrow. How could he not see the invisible chains that bound them both? How could he continue to walk so blindly in the path Uther had carved for him? It was in the quiet hours of the night that Morgana found herself most at war with her thoughts. The question haunted her. If Uther could hide something as monumental as her true heritage, what else had he concealed? She found herself listening more closely to the hushed conversations of the nobles, watching their expressions when Uther spoke of justice and honor. Had others, too, suffered under his rule? Had others, like her, been cast aside to serve his ambitions? The whispers in the dark began to take shape, voices of discontent, of those who had lost loved ones to Uther's ruthless policies. Camelot stood as a beacon of order, but at what cost? Noble lords who had once pledged loyalty to Uther had their own grievances, their own quiet resentments. They would never dare voice them openly, but Morgana saw the flickers of doubt in their eyes, the careful way they measured their words, and among them she found something unexpected, an opportunity. She was not alone in her doubts, and that realization was intoxicating. For years she had believed in Uther's rule, in the grandeur of Camelot, in the righteousness of its cause. But now, the cracks in the foundation were impossible to ignore. If Uther had been willing to deceive her, what else was he capable of? And if his rule was built on half-truths and fear, then perhaps it was not as unshakable as it seemed. Morgana began to listen, to observe, to understand the currents of unrest that flowed beneath Camelot's shining surface. She spoke in careful, measured tones, planting questions in the minds of those who had already harbored quiet doubts. She did not yet know what course her path would take, but she knew this: she would never be powerless again. She had been cast aside, but she would not remain forgotten. The blood of Pendragon ran through her veins, and she would ensure that it was not only Arthur's name that history would remember. And so, in the shadow of the great castle that had been her home, Morgana began to weave a new destiny, one that would forever alter the fate of Camelot. Chapter 5: Whispers in the Dark. The corridors of Camelot were never silent. By day, they echoed with the sounds of knights training, courtiers scheming, and servants bustling about their duties. But at night, a different kind of sound took hold. Whispers that clung to the shadows like a lingering mist. It was in these quiet hours that Morgana found herself most uneasy. For it was then that she could no longer ignore the thoughts that had been festering within her. She had begun to listen more carefully, to the murmured complaints of noblemen who felt slighted by Uther's rule, to the discontented sighs of knights who questioned the rigid path set before them, and, more dangerously, to those who spoke of change in hushed, deliberate tones. One such voice found her that evening. A cloaked figure waited in the shadow of a great stone column as she made her way through a lesser-used passage of the keep. She did not startle. Morgana was never one to show weakness, but she hesitated just long enough to let them know she was aware of their presence. "My lady." The figure greeted her smoothly, stepping forward into the dim torchlight. A man, dressed in the modest garb of a court scholar, yet there was something in his bearing that suggested he was far more than that. His dark eyes studied her, assessing, measuring. "I did not expect to find you alone." "Then you underestimate me," Morgana replied coolly. a small, knowing smile. On the contrary, I have been watching you for some time. Lady Morgana, you see more than most. You understand more than you let on. She crossed her arms, feigning impatience even as curiosity tugged at her. And what is it that you think I understand? That Camelot is changing. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. That the golden kingdom your king wishes to build may not be in everyone's best interests. Morgana's heart pounded, but she kept her expression impassive. You speak boldly for a man who stands within Uther's walls. I speak for truth, and I believe you, more than anyone, are willing to hear it. His gaze was steady, unwavering. Tell me, my lady, if given the chance, would you shape the future of Camelot, or will you merely watch as others do it for you? The question lingered in the air between them, heavier than any blade. Morgana felt the weight of it settle in her chest. She had spent her life being told her place, following paths laid out by others. But now, for the first time, she was being asked what she would choose for herself. She did not answer, not yet, but as she turned and disappeared into the night, she knew one thing for certain. She would not remain a spectator in the story of Camelot. And so, gentle listeners, as we draw the curtain on this chapter of Morgana's story, a tale of secrets, revelations, and the shifting tides of fate, as we have seen, the path she walks is uncertain, her heart torn between loyalty and the whispers of destiny, but her journey is far from over. Join us next time as we step deeper into the shadows of Camelot, where tensions rise, alliances are tested, and the forces of play threaten to change the kingdom forever. What awaits Arthur, Morgana, and those who stand beside them? Only time will tell. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and leave us a review or send one to whispersofthepastreviews@gmail.com. Also share the podcast with your friends and family, as it truly helps bring these legends to life for more listeners. Thank you for joining us on this journey through myth and history, and we'll see you in the next episode.